Um, Thank you, Siri. Appreciate it. So now what we're going to do, if you on Thursdays, there's going to be a small PDF that I'll email out to everybody who registered for the course. It will have an introduction to next Wednesday's gospel. So for next Wednesday, I'm going to invite you to read the Gospel of Mark in its entirety. It's actually our shortest gospel at just 16 chapters. And it'll have a small outline of not only how the gospel itself is structured, but it'll have some notes, some preliminary notes on kind of the community that created Mark's gospel, as well as some signposts for things to look for, things that I'll probably be spending some time concentrating on the next week's class. So it's meant to hopefully you get as much in as you get as much out as you put in. But really, the hope is that you'll come even if you feel like you're not prepared, because the course is designed in such a way that you don't need to come with a lot of background knowledge. You don't have to do really any prep work. Just please come. That's my request as we start our time together. So this class is called The Five Christs, but our Bible as we know it contains four Gospels. They're Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And they each tell the story of a Jesus of Nazareth, his ministry, and his execution and resurrection. But the question we have to start with is, why do we hear the story four times? And a related question to that one is, of course, do the Gospels actually tell the same story four times over? And I think the answer to that question is, to hedge a little bit yes, and a little bit no. Sorry, just letting some folks into the room. While the four Gospels tell a very similar story, I believe that they are each a unique understanding of the importance of who Jesus Christ is, what his life, death, and resurrection meant for the community that created this gospel. And that's really where we're going to spend a lot of our time together, is looking at how the community that created these gospels, how their experience of Jesus influenced their understanding, not just of who Jesus was, but how his ministry on earth took shape. So that's why this class is called The Five Christs, because I believe that each gospel is unique, and then perhaps it is so unique that it is actually a distinct portrait of Jesus presented in each individual gospel. So then, of course, the next question we have to ask is, where is the fifth Jesus? And so for that, let me share my screen. So the five Christs that, as I know them, are first the Gospel of Mark. And in a few moments, we'll talk about why I put Mark first instead of Matthew. But Mark's Jesus is a portrait of a rebel. The next gospel we'll explore is Matthew, who understands Jesus to be principally a rabbi. And we'll talk more about that in a moment. Our third gospel is Luke, who finds Jesus to be a wonderful storyteller. And finally, we have the Jesus of John's gospel, who introduces to us the mystic. But the fifth Christ is one of our own. The fifth Christ is our own personal Jesus. And that's what we're going to explore in our final class together. Is Jesus asks a very important question: who do you say that I am? And so after the first 5 weeks of exploring the Gospels as a group and then individually, our conclusion will be answering that question for ourselves. Who do we believe Jesus to be in our own lives? What facets of the different gospel do we find kind of most compelling? And perhaps what portraits of Jesus are kind of a source of either confusion or confoundment, which is a word I think I just invented, but that's okay. So that's kind of where we're headed. And the kind of assumption of this class is that the history that the community of followers experienced directly influenced their understanding of who Jesus was. And because these are 4 different communities with 4 very different experiences, of course it makes sense that their image and the image of why Jesus is important is varied among them. So is there any, let me just stop there for a moment and see if there's any questions about that. I'll kind of, does it seem too controversial yet or pretty good? Okay, nobody's on their cell phone calling Bishop Megan. Wonderful. Okay, so my name is Matt Warren. As I said, I serve 2 churches, and what I would like to do for just a moment is to kind of allow you guys to create some community and maybe share, and I'll put my screen back up for a moment. If you could share your name and what congregation you are a part of. Oh, sorry, gotta apologize for that. Your name, your congregation, and maybe just a quick rundown of why you were interested in taking this course. So if you don't mind, what I'll do is I'll go by my matrix that I have here. So if I can invite the Griffins to start off.
Well, this is Pam, and I'm John. We're members.
Very good.
I got it right. Okay, good. We're members at Holy Trinity in Nevada City. Brad really put a push on for your class, and we thought it sounded like fun. So here we are.
Great. Thank you, Griffins. Erin.
Yes, I'm Erin Thomas Rose. I am a longtime member at Trinity Episcopal, and I believe maybe by next week, my husband Stan might be joining us as well.
Great.
But we have a small home group, many of whom you see on the page here, who thought this might be a good point of discussion when we meet. And for me personally, I do sometimes struggle with some of what seem to be discrepancies in the word, and appreciate hearing about different people's interpretation of Christ and different interpretations as presented through the Gospels. So.
Thank you so much. And we'll be talking about some of those discrepancies tonight. So we'll kind of give an introduction as to how we can explain some of them and what we do with the ones we can't explain. So, Midge.
Yes, I'm Midge Gallagher. I'm a member of Holy Trinity Church. I am a cradle Episcopalian. My paternal grandfather was an Episcopal priest. And but I haven't done that many Bible studies. And the ones that I have tried were kind of too fundamentalist and judgmental for me. Like their way was the right way and there's no interpretation. And how can you have 4 different gospels that all have different interpretations? So I kind of thought I'd like to try this one.
That's fine. I am pretty fundamentalist when it comes to the designated hitter rule, so I will not allow for discussion or debate on that. But if we can stay away from that, I think this will be a safe place for most other topics. So, Barry.
Yeah, I'm Barry, Holy Trinity, Nevada City. Yeah, I thought, oh, Matt has discovered a 5th gospel. I can hardly wait. Well, no, I guess I'm just in general interested in the gospels, and I know I'm going to learn a lot.
Great, thank you, Barry.
Yeah.
Ellen.
I'm Ellen Gamelgard, also from Trinity. Fairly new there, last maybe 3 years, and I enjoy that. I just, I was in a Bible study that with Brad and with a couple of people on here now, and I really missed it when COVID started. So I just thought this would be a great time to get reconnected with Christ. So I'm here. No mosquitoes out.
And then forgive me, I've forgotten your name, but your email is listed. So the poodleshire at Gmail. Forgive me for forgetting your name. Sherry. Oh, you're still muted. Sorry.
I'm Sherry. I'm a member of Holy Trinity Church. I've been going to church forever and ever, kind of like Midge. But surprisingly, I don't have a very good grasp of some of the fundamentals of church, like the difference between the Gospels and what is the difference between apostles and disciples. And I just have a lot of questions. And so this was a great place for me to start getting some answers, I thought. So you come highly recommended.
I owe Brad a beer for how well he's selling the course.
Yeah.
Let's go to Barry and then Chip and Peggy next.
Hi, Barry Schertz with Holy Trinity. Brad made me attend, so that's why I'm here. Just kidding. No, I'm always interested in learning more about the Gospels, and I found the title really intriguing. So I went ahead and signed up, and I'm looking forward to it.
Great, thanks. Chip and Peggy, and then Alan and Linda next.
Okay, Chip and Peggy here. We go to Holy Trinity. And I have heard you speak before at Trinity and thought you might be worth listening to and learning a thing or two from. So I'm looking forward to it. I love studying scripture.
I want to talk to you about starting the 10th inning with the man on second base.
Yeah,
Yeah, that,
yeah, my husband will be.
I know.
well, I'm certain. I hope I'm at least worth the price of admission, Peggy, for this free class. So we'll do Alan and Linda, and then Heather and Joe next.
Okay, well, I'm sorry I can't put my picture up because I am technologically inept. Okay, it's just the way it is. But I will speak that I grew up in a family of Methodists and Church of Christ. Okay, and my choice was to go to the Methodist Church because I ended up being in the youth group, the youth choir, the adult choir, all that other stuff. But when I came up here, and in the last probably 10 years or so, I became a little disgruntled, if to lack of better words, with the Methodist Church. And I had heard from our wonderful neighbors, Joe and Heather Way, how much they loved Matt Warren in the Episcopal Church. And so my husband really loved the church choir at the Methodist Church. I left because it was like, done. And I came to the Episcopal Church. I came to the Episcopal Church. I can't even remember what year it was, Matt, but I think it was like 4 or 5 years ago. I don't know. But I am so glad I did that. I so appreciate you. You're just an incredible, intelligent, techie person. And I love that. And I want to learn more about the Gospels. I mean, I didn't really have that when I was at the Methodist Church, because, and again, I don't mean to be rude, but why do you only have communion once a month? I don't understand that. So anyway, I'm here to learn more, Matt, and I appreciate you to the moon and back.
Well, thanks,
Okay.
Linda. We'll go Heather and Joe, and then Mary and Paul.
Okay, we are Heather here and Joe Way of Quincy, Christ the King. And I guess we'll take credit for bringing Linda and Alan aboard. They are delightful neighbors. We were struck by the title of the class, that intriguing title, and we wanted to find out what in the world you're talking about. So that's why we're here.
Thanks, Heather and Joe. Mary and Paul, and then Heather.
You all know Mary. I'm Mr. Pastor Mary. I have to chime in. I have to ask Ms. DeWolf, was that Church of Christ non-instrumental? Because that's what I was raised in. And Aaron Thomas Rose, I share your sense of there are all these different profiles of Christ that emerge, all these different angles, different images of him. And so I look forward to Matt's help in sort of sorting through that.
So could you repeat that question? I'm sorry, I didn't hear it.
Was it Church of Christ non-instrumental?
Well, my family grew up in Church of Christ, and I did go to Church of Christ and I did Bible studies, but I have to admit, somebody had said that it was judgmental, and I
just wanted to clarify.
I didn't really enjoy that. And
I just wanted to clarify because that's one of the characteristics of the church I was raised in. That is how strict they were.
What was your church that you?
Church of Christ, non-instrumental. We had no instruments.
I totally understand that.
Yeah,
totally understand that.
I've always enjoyed Matt's sermon, and they're always so educational. So I was looking forward to hearing from you.
Indeed, indeed, indeed.
All right, so I sorry to change course with Heather, but if we could not feed my ego anymore, I think it's probably in all of your best interests. So, but Heather, then Cheryl, take it away.
Matt, it's okay to get your ego fed because you're good at what you do.
Heather.
Got the one with what's her name, Rosalie staring right at you. When you took a face, Rosalie was staring up right at you.
Yeah, but I'm always like this.
Heather or Cheryl, could I ask you to speak? So Heather, I think you're muted. I'm sorry.
I'm going today. That was yesterday. What is that?
Maybe we can come back to Heather. Cheryl and then Ann.
Yeah, hi. Hi, I'm Cheryl Tadman. I'm with Holy Trinity, Nevada City. Been a lifelong Episcopalian and have been going to Bible study at Evangelical Church. And now I wanted to start with you. So you never can learn enough about the Bible.
I love it. I'm a lifelong learner, and my job is to make other people the same. So Heather, could we try you again? I think you were just muted. I wonder if I can unmute you from here. No.
Oh.
Okay.
I'm wondering if Heather's internet.
Now can you hear me?
Yes.
There we go.
Okay, I am Heather.
Thank you for being patient with me.
No, I'm new at this too. I go to Trinity in Grass Valley, and I've been really hungry for this kind of a group where we can discuss who Jesus is in our lives now. And I was a hospice chaplain for 30 some years, so I've heard people struggle with that, and it's a lively question for me to hear people talk about from their own life experience, which is why I like the Gospels. Okay.
Thank you, Heather. Appreciate it. Glad we could get that mute button found, unmute button found. If we could go to Ann and then Mike, please.
Okay, I figured it out. Yeah. Okay, so I'm at Trinity Episcopal in Nevada City also. And I study Bible a lot, and I always finding new things that are just absolutely awesome and inspiring. And I know it doesn't have to be a fancy, complicated class. There'll be stuff there for me. And also, I'm very interested in this technology for people today in the current situation that we've got with limiting church meetings, I'm really interested in how this technology can be utilized to keep the church together, because we are supposed to meet but we can't meet. I mean, we've been shut down a number of times already. All you guys have been. And so to be able to get in the catacombs, so to speak, with a Zoom meeting, when they couldn't meet in ancient times, they would meet secretly. Well, this is not secret, but it's an accommodation to the existing situation that I'm really interested in how it'll work. And then there's all these people that I see these faces. I know these people by name in my church. I haven't been there that long, about 4 years. And now I'm going to get to know you guys. And that's not possible in the normal church setup. So I think this is an excellent opportunity for all of us. And I'm really interested to see how it goes. It's a different kind of opportunity than getting together in a room someplace in between services, on Sundays or at somebody's home during the week. It has huge possibilities is what I'm thinking. So I'm really interested in that part of it. Anyway.
Thank you. And we're gonna be using we're gonna be on the cutting edge of technology, which is always a dangerous spot to be. But we'll right after our introductions, we've got a game show all set up for us. So let's go to Mike and then Larry.
Hi, I'm Mike. I go to Holy Trinity in Nevada City. Fascinated by the title. I'm hoping there'll be a Christ for in the 6th and the 7th Christ, because he really does fill everything, and that's it.
Great, thanks, Mike. Larry and then Craig.
So my name is Larry Hoy, and this is Gene Hoy over here. We're up at Lake Tahoe watching the smoke float around in the ash. Holy Trinity Church, both of us.
I'll speak.
I joined this because my wife told me to. So that's a good reason. And
it is.
and
Hi, Sherry.
And I tell you, let me tell you, I appreciate it because I do need a lot of help. I've grown up churchless for many, many, many years, and thankfully, Trinity has become a home for me. So, thank you very much for presenting these lessons.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to learning a lot. Jean.
Hi, I'm Jean. We've been members of Trinity for 40 years. First of all, I'm recovering from breast cancer, so I haven't been to church for over a year, but it's wonderful to see all the faces of people I know so well. And so I love the phrase, a cradle Episcopalian. I've just heard it again with Midge, but actually I'm a cradle Church of England, which is sort of the same thing. And so I think this is a wonderful subject, Matt, and we're really looking forward to digging into it with you. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Craig and then the Hoyas.
Hello, I'm Craig Mulder, Christ the King Episcopal Church in Quincy. Basically 2 reasons. Continuing my education because I have an inquiry in mind and want to know. And then second of all, to be part of a larger religious community. I'm not a lifelong Episcopalian, but it'd be nice to meet some more people with like-minded. Thanks.
Thanks, Craig. Todd and Karen.
Hi, I'm a member of Holy Trinity and I have been for 8 years. I'm grateful for the Episcopal Church and I signed up because I love the teachings and everything about the Episcopal Church, and I want to dig even deeper and find out the perspective on Christ. And also I wanted to add, we went to Israel this year, and it just brought Christ to the forefront in a physical way that beyond the spiritual that I had experienced before. And so it just made me want to get to know our Lord even better.
Fantastic. Thanks, Karen.
Todd?
Todd Hoyda. I'm with Karen, and I'm also with Holy Trinity. Your marketing was great, but for me, honestly, I'm a very literal person. I'm challenged unless people tell me sometimes what's going on in these deeper meanings and the nuance. So this is just a beautiful opportunity for me. This is the best kind of learning, is to understand the nuance between topics, even different Bibles, of course, and the different commentaries. No, actually, I guess translations. I meant to say, but I just love the way you're teaching as well as the topic. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Todd. Leah, and then Father Cohn.
My name is Leah. I'm new to Holy Trinity, about maybe 4 to 5 months, seems longer. Prior to that, I was at a Presbyterian Methodist church, combination from the 1800s over in Placerville. And then during COVID time, even though I live in Nevada City, I was still driving back there to participate in music, play the piano for the choir and the congregation. And then COVID shut that down. So then I started watching church online. And then I started wondering why I was driving 2 hours to church when I could go online. And then I discovered Holy Trinity somewhere online as I was looking, and just feel so honored to be there. And I'm participating in this study. What intrigued me was I've always noticed the differences in the Gospels. You know, like you said, Luke, the storyteller. Luke is very much a storyteller, and Mark more succinct. And it piqued my interest to hear about the different Christ. What was the different lenses they were seeing him through, or discoveries or conclusions that they made about him. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. You might be a substitute teacher. You're already there, so that's great. Father Cohn, and then Sherry.
Hello, I'm Father David Cohen. I serve St. Michael's in Alturas and Good Shepherd in Susanville. As you might have gathered from my name, I was not raised Episcopalian or any denomination of Christian. I'm actually from a Jewish background. So I'm always interested in expanding my knowledge of Christology.
Thanks, David. Sherry, and then the Hendersons.
Hi, I'm Sherry Mulder. My husband just spoke. We're in different parts of the house, and please excuse the bandage. I just had a little bit of surgery yesterday. I am truly a cradle Episcopalian because my first home was the basement of the church that my father was a vicar at in Wisconsin. So I literally, my cradle was in the basement of the church. So I've been with it for a while, but what I haven't done is really studied the scriptures. And I have my own relationship with God, but I really want to know these different facets of Christ and how these different facets have come from witnessing this one person who only lived to be 33 years old. So I'm very interested in Matt pulling all this information out and us learning. And yes, I'm a follower of Matt. I go to church in Quincy too.
Thanks, Sherry.
For better or worse, Matt.
Yeah, for better, but it's a pretty mixed bag. Let's do the Hendersons and then Andrew.
Well, hello, I'm Nancy Henderson, and I promise to log in with my name next time. There's only one of me, although the other one of me is currently on the Dixie Fire trying to do what he does. And next week I will be on the Caldor, so I may or may not make it. I am a cradle Congregationalist, and I have been an Episcopalian for a whopping 10 days.
Welcome.
But it feels like home. I also am at Holy Trinity. I think Brad owes you more than a beer, given the turnout that I'm seeing here. And I'm just looking to learn more. I am very much a metaphorical interpreter of the Bible. I'm not a literalist by any means, but I struggle with the varying images of Christ presented, and I want to learn more.
Thank you, Nancy. Andrew and then Polly.
Yeah, hi, I'm Andrew Harris, Andy Harris. I go to Holy Trinity Church in Nevada City, and I love Jesus. And the more I can learn about him, the more I'm willing to do that. I study and read all the time, so I'm just really interested in unpacking the four Gospels even further with your guidance. And so I look forward to it. Thanks for putting this on. I really appreciate it.
Great. Thanks. And Polly, last but not least. Hey, Polly, I think we can hear you now, I think.
Okay, I'm not getting it.
We can hear you.
Anyway, I'm Rick Tuggle.
Oh, Rick, okay, sorry.
Okay, so Polly's no longer with us. But,
Oh, I'm sorry.
But anyway, yeah, I was intrigued with how Brad sold your type of program. So I thought I'd tune in and see what it was all about.
Great. Sounds good. Thank you.
Again, I'm at the Holy Trinity in Nevada City.
Yeah. Well, at this point, I'm not sure who owes who a beverage, but Brad and I will, rest assured, we'll work it out. So, so this is the most nerve-wracking part of tonight's presentation because I'm sending out to you a app request, which should show up in Zoom. Did that show up for everybody? All right, now I'm going to share my screen. And what we're going to do is we're going to play a game show here. So now could somebody maybe tell me what you guys are seeing on your screen? Are you able to like choose a name?
I see question 1 to 25.
Okay. So if the interactive part of this doesn't work, it'll be okay. We'll just kind of go through it. This is a quiz to kind of ask to, we just kind of want to set a barometer for what we think is in each of the Gospels. So if the interactive part doesn't work, we'll just kind of sign in.
Matt, we had a message that we are anonymous and would have to log in.
Okay.
Yes, I get
just click on anonymous then. Yeah, that we don't need to log in. That would be. So we're waiting for players. And again, I'm going to give it a few moments just to see if it works. And if not, we're going to just go through the questions.
Yeah, he'll go through the questions.
All right. So already we're off.
So Matt, I'm seeing a website, www.menti.com,
Yeah.
and then a code. What am I supposed to do?
See, this is where I thought the bleeding edge might be tough. Tell you
Okay.
what, we're gonna do this. We'll do this a different way. We're just gonna ask the questions. So let me stop the share. Sorry. I was hoping we could do a game show here. So let me do it this way.
Can I ask
So
a question?
the,
You just read.
I'm going to call randomly, or I'm going to give you all an opportunity to raise your hand. That's how we'll do this. But I'm going to ask a question. It's going to be multiple choice. And the first question is going to be, in which gospel is there a story of Jesus's birth? Anybody want to raise their hand? Anybody know the answer to that?
answer.
Okay, I see Paul Houck with his hand raised. Luke, any others?
Oh, I don't think so.
Okay, so the answer for that one is actually Luke and Matthew.
And Matthew.
Oh, Matthew.
Yep.
Of course.
So only 2 out of our 4 gospels actually have a story of how Jesus was born. So then the next question is, in which or in how many gospels is there a story of Mary riding on a donkey into Bethlehem? And you can either raise your hand on your screen or use the raise hand. So I saw John Griffin going first.
I'm going to say none.
Correct. That's the right answer. So the image of Mary riding on a donkey is a wonderful image. It just has no basis in scripture. So let's go to the next one. In which gospel or gospels trace Jesus's lineage back to Abraham? Mike, with your hand up. Mike, what's your answer?
He's muted.
Matthew.
Correct. That's right. For a bonus question or bonus, which gospel traces Jesus's lineage all the way back to Adam?
Matthew.
No, Luke.
Luke, right. So wonderful. Next question. In which gospel or gospels is there a story about Jesus as a young adult? Ooh, I think Chip wants to answer. I saw a hand move, but it's difficult. Chip, you want to venture a guess in which gospel or gospels is there a story of Jesus?
I'm going with Luke.
Luke is correct. That's right. Midge, I saw you raise your hand, so I'm going to call on this one for you. In which gospel does Jesus cleanse the temple at the beginning of his ministry? Do you have an answer, Midge?
Oh, man. I don't know, maybe Mark?
Oh, close. Anyone else want to venture a guess? Where does Jesus cleanse the temple at the beginning of his ministry?
John.
John, Father Cohn gets it correct. So in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Jesus cleanses the temple as a part of Holy Week. But in John, it happens in, I believe, end of chapter 2. End of chapter 2. Okay. In which gospel does Jesus offer the Beatitudes? The blessed are the ... Very good hand raised.
Yeah, that's Matthew.
Is there any others?
I think Luke has similar.
Yep.
Yeah, some of them.
So they both both Matthew and Luke have Jesus saying the Beatitudes. Here's a follow-up question. Jesus offers the Beatitudes on a plain and on the Mount. Which gospel has the Sermon on the Mount?
That's Matthew.
Matthew.
Matthew. All right, perfect. You guys are getting good. I dare say I worry a little bit cocky, but here we'll go. In which gospel does Jesus tell the story of the Good Samaritan?
Luke.
Yep, Anne's got it. Love it.
Yeah, and I think it's Luke 10 or 11. I'm not sure.
Perfect.
I always get that one mixed up and think it's in 16, and then I have to look it up.
So I'll give you a hint here. There's more than one for this answer. In which gospels does Jesus perform an exorcism?
Okay.
Chip's making hand movements, I see. I'm gonna pick on Peggy though. Peggy, which gospels have Jesus performing an exorcism?
John. He's cheating. He's telling me. And by the way, is this quiz open book?
If you can get that quickly, yeah. But I'm lightning fast here. So John is actually the only gospel that does not have an exorcism.
Oh, I should listen to my husband.
Yeah. So Matthew, Mark, and Luke all have Jesus casting out a demon. The Gospel of John does not.
Wait a second. I object to that. Aren't all of those healings really exorcisms? Bottom line, I don't get it. Anyway.
The wonderful thing about being the quiz show host is I get to be my own judge. So I'm saying an exorcism is where Jesus casts out a demon.
Or where it's specified that it was a demon.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what you're saying. Okay. I got it.
Yeah.
Now I know where it's coming from. Got it.
Gotcha. Yeah. In which gospel does Jesus meet Nicodemus? How many of us pay
in
close
John.
attention to the... Yep, Ann got it right. John. Let's see here. We'll do a few more just to
I think
kind of...
Nicodemus
there's a
is
few-
in the epistles, but yeah.
This is one of my favorite miracle stories. And next week, we're going to talk about why this is so important. In how many gospels and in which gospel does it take Jesus 2 tries to heal a person? Jesus doesn't get it all the way.
Right. Yeah, I remember. Let's see, what was that?
Anybody have a guess? I'm going to call on let's do Barry. Do you have a guess?
I knew the answer to the last one, but I do not know the answer to this one.
Okay. So this one is the Gospel of Mark, and we're going to talk about why that 2-stage miracle is so important next week. And I think I just have 2 more, then we'll finish up here. Looking at my notes. Come on. In which gospel or gospels does Jesus calm the storm? I'm going to start picking on my own congregation. Linda, do you know which gospel does Jesus walk?
I'm thinking Mark.
Mark's one of them. Yep.
Okay. Other than that, I'm sorry, I don't know.
Okay. So it's Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Jesus comes to the storm. How about which gospels does Jesus walk on the water?
Well, in those, Mark and Luke also, that's part of the story.
Mark for
All
sure.
4.
Mark for sure.
Oh, okay.
But
I'm
Jesus
thinking,
doesn't
okay.
walk
I'm
on the
thinking
water.
Mark, Luke, and John. Both,
Right, Matthew,
all
Mark, and
3 of those.
no, Jesus only walks on the water in Matthew, Mark, and John. Jesus does not walk on the water in the Gospel of Luke.
Okay. I was close. I was close.
So, all right, now here we're as you can tell, we're kind of going in chronological order here. So we'll do two more questions. In which gospel does Jesus visit Jerusalem more than twice?
Twice.
John.
Right, that's the correct answer. So in Luke, we have Jesus go to Jerusalem twice, once as a 12-year-old and the other for Holy Week. John has Jesus going to Jerusalem multiple times. Okay, last question. And this is two parts. First question, in which gospel or gospels does Jesus die after the sun's light has failed?
Luke.
That's one of them.
Okay. Matthew.
I'm gonna pick on the clergy here. Ken and Mary, do you have a guess? Is there a few more? So Jesus dies in darkness in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Is there a gospel in which Jesus dies with the sun shining?
Wouldn't that be John?
That would be John. So, and we'll talk in a couple of weeks.
By process of elimination, wouldn't that be?
Yeah. So we're going to talk about why that's so different when we get to the Gospel of John in a couple of weeks. So what I hope we're noticing about the answers is there are some stories that we know that happen only in one gospel. So stories like the Good Samaritan happen only in the Gospel of Luke. The Sermon on the Mount only happens in the Gospel of Matthew. It takes place in a different setting in Luke's Gospel. It happens on the plain. There's stories of Jesus not performing a miracle fully, and so it happens in two stages. So there are stories that only happen in one gospel. There are also a number of stories that happen in both Matthew and Luke, but they are not part of either Mark or John's gospel. We call that a minor agreement when Matthew and Luke report the same thing. There are also a number of stories that are shared by three gospels, and almost most commonly, these are shared by Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And John's gospel is probably the most unique. It shares the least number of stories with the other four gospels. So right from the beginning, we're beginning to see some of the diversity of what the gospels are reporting to us through the ages. And so immediately when we discover that the gospels tell different stories, my mind immediately goes to how can we explain these differences? And I think there are a number of ways to explain them that are really completely uncontroversial. When we think about how the Gospels were written, they kind of take together and funnel a compilation of stories about what Jesus did, sayings, things that they heard Jesus teach, and they were also eyewitness accounts to Jesus's life. And so when you're talking about how these stories, these sayings, these accounts are kind of making their way around the Mediterranean Sea, a really easy way to explain these differences is that the gospel writers didn't have the same access to the same eyewitnesses. This becomes incredibly clear in the Gospel of Mark. So Mark, during the scene of the crucifixion, right? Mark, the Romans compelled a Simon of Cyrene to help carry Jesus's cross. But Mark does something more than that. He tells you who Simon of Cyrene is. That's Rufus's father, as if to suggest that I got this story from Rufus, whose father told him. And it's perhaps clear that Matthew and Luke, that no one in those communities knew Simon of Cyrene or his child. And so they just have different access to different materials. A lot of times I liken the Gospels to reporting on a presidential campaign. So I'll do my best to kind of pick a apolitical presidential campaign. So imagine George Washington was running for president, and somebody comes to you and says, well, I saw George Washington give a speech in front of a red barn. Okay, we'll write a story. Got it. George Washington, red barn. And somebody else comes and says, well, I heard President Washington campaign next to the river. Okay, that again, totally plausible. The fact that we're telling one story slightly different from another, one easy explanation is that something happened more than once. And that's an easy way to kind of explain what happened. Why is there a difference between Jesus speaking on a mountain versus speaking on a plain? Well, maybe he did both. And our eyewitnesses, as they kind of filtered their way through to the evangelists of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, we just had different information. But I also think the when these Gospels were written matters. So I'm just going to check the chat. Great. So let me go, here's a timeline of the kind of the New Testament era. All right, so somewhere, and I personally believe that Jesus was born sometime around the year 6 to 4 BC, but we have the life of Jesus. Now, this isn't the life of Paul, but this is the ministry of Paul. And you can see there's a little bit of gap here. So Paul doesn't start his missionary activity, of course, until after he experiences the resurrected Christ on the road to Emmaus. But there are some other events that happen in the first century that help us kind of understand how these Gospels were written. So in the year 65, we have that fire that burned while Nero was fiddling, right? Nero blames the fire that engulfed Rome on the followers of Christus, which is a Latinization of the word Christ. So Nero is blaming the fire of Rome on Christians, and that begins a period of intense persecution of Christians in Rome. And it's right around that time that we believe both Paul and Peter were executed in and around Rome. On the other corner of the Mediterranean, in the year 70, there is the second temple in Jerusalem is destroyed. Oops, sorry. That has a profound effect on not only the kind of cultic worship life of the Jewish population in and around Palestine, but it also has profound effects for the understanding of what Jesus prophesied during his life. And so we've got these arrows where we think these Gospels are written. So Mark's Gospel, we think, was written right around the time of the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem and very shortly after the Roman persecution in Rome, actually the Roman persecution of Christians beginning in the year 65. Matthew and Luke, most scholars think, was written about 10 years later, somewhere between 70 to 85 is kind of a good range for both of those authors. John is likely the last gospel to be written, and it was written probably right before the year 100. And most significantly for John, his gospel is being written after Christians have been removed from the temple. But I want to talk about why we think some of these, why this is a good working theory. And what clues we're basing these on. So let's talk about some of why we think those gospels were written in that order. Oh, sorry, let me go, sorry. Forgot I've got so much technology. Okay, here we go. So we're going to share my screen, start broadcast. One of the reasons why we think the Gospels, are you seeing this, I hope? Start broadcast. Okay, 3, 2, 1. All right, you guys see my screen now, I hope? There we go.
Yes.
All right. Another reason why we think, this is my chance to be John Madden here. Another reason why we think the Gospels were written in a different place is the action that happens. So here's Mark in blue. And so what action does Jesus's ministry start? Well, it starts somewhere down here on the Jordan River, right, where John baptizes him. He goes up into Galilee, crosses over the Sea of Galilee several times, going back and forth from the Decapolis back into Jewish territory, and then kind of eventually makes his way through Jericho onto Jerusalem. So our gospel lesson for Sunday is going to be Jesus crossing over into this Gentile area of the Decapolis, and that's where we're going to meet the Syrophoenician woman. So that's Mark's gospel. Matthew starts in Nazareth, right? Follows Mary and Joseph down to Bethlehem. But then Jesus and his family take a detour into Egypt to escape King Herod, right? And then we make our way back up to Nazareth. We're active in and around the Sea of Galilee. And again, we make our way down to Jerusalem. Luke, on the other hand, I'll do purple for Luke, has a similar story. We begin in Galilee. We find our way down to Bethlehem. Return to Galilee. Jesus comes to Jerusalem once as a teenager. His ministry is active here in Galilee, and then he sets his face towards Jerusalem in chapter 9. And the whole second half of Luke's gospel from chapter 9 to the end is Jesus making his way down to Jerusalem, down to the city that executes the prophets and the saints. Now, our final gospel is John, and this is where we start to see another interesting thing. In the Gospel of John, Jesus goes back and forth between Galilee and Jerusalem 3 times. So you start to wonder, why do we think that Jesus had a ministry of about 3 years or so? The answer is because we've read the Gospel of John, and because Jesus, being an observant member of the Jewish faith,
I'm on a Zoom
down to Jerusalem.
So anyway, I'll give you a call back. Huh?
Just
It'll be about a half an hour or less. All right, bye.
So this is where we start to see more differences between the Gospels, is the geography of where Jesus runs. There we go. So any questions on that, on kind of those beginning differences?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So they went back and forth just to gather information or to follow Jesus's footsteps in each of those?
No, I'm sorry. Thank you for that, asking that question. No, what those lines were tracing is the geographical position of where Jesus is during the gospel as it progresses. So in the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus never enters Jerusalem in the story until Holy Week. And in Luke's gospel, or in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, we're never told that Jesus goes into Jerusalem as an adult before Holy Week. So that line was just tracing, where in the world is Jesus of Nazareth during the Gospels? Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So now going back to the question, why do we think Mark was written first? It comes down to math. 98% of the Gospel of Mark can be found in some shape or form within the Gospel of Matthew. Putting it another way, 60% of Matthew, so almost 2/3 of Matthew, seems to be taken directly from Mark, which also means that there's 40% that Matthew got from some other source. Now, similarly, in Luke's Gospel, 88% of Mark's Gospel is in Luke's Gospel. But the percentage of Markan material in Luke's Gospel is actually even smaller, only about 47% of the Gospel of Luke in its entirety is taken from Mark. So it seems very likely that when Matthew and Luke were writing their gospel, that somewhere on somewhere on Matthew and Luke's desk was a copy of Mark's gospel, because so much of Mark's gospel finds its way into the gospels of Matthew and Luke. So, I'm going to share my screen once more. Sorry for this strobe light effect with sharing screens. So this is what we call source theory in the New Testament. So there's the Gospel of Mark, and that gets kind of drawn into the Gospels of Matthew and Luke. So Matthew and Luke use Mark, but there are so many instances where Matthew and Luke agree with each other without there being any corresponding passage from the Gospel of Mark. And 99% of these times, this is Jesus speaking. So that somehow Matthew and Luke, when they agree with one another without any guidance from Mark, Jesus is speaking. And so it seems clear that in addition to Mark, both Matthew and Luke had another book or another collection of Jesus's sayings, a collection of Jesus's teaching almost. Now we
Can I ask something?
Evidence of that today, so we can't find it. But theologians beginning in about the year 1900 start this hypothesis, and they start calling this document that we've never seen the Quelle, which is German for source. We call it Q for short, and I hope you don't mind, but I am a James Bond fan, and so when I think of Q, this is the gentleman I think of.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Ian.
Okay, but I've heard all that you're saying before, but the way you're presenting it it instantly comes up. Well, yeah, but there was a source, which was the congregation. There were probably hundreds of people in the congregations of that time who knew things, and maybe they didn't write it down, but anybody who was writing another version, because it says in Acts that the author there was writing in order to explain all of this conflicting rumors and gossip that was going on, and so why do they eliminate the little person here and the little person there and have to have some cue? Do you see the question?
Let me on this slide, I'll answer that question, because they don't eliminate
okay,
it,
good.
they just augment it. So here's Mark and here's Q. And Matthew and Luke are drawing from both of these sources to help write their gospels. But what Anne is suggesting is that Matthew and Luke, as part of their congregations, also had additional stories. And it's absolutely right. And what we call that is special Matthew and special Luke. So it's this source, special Matthew, is where we get information that isn't in Mark, that isn't in Q, and it isn't in Luke or John. This is where Matthew got some of the stories from his community. So an example of special Matthew, let's start early on in the Gospels, is the three wise men. The story of the three wise men is only found in the Gospel of Matthew. And so there was somebody in Matthew's community who remembered or was told, you know, there was this story of wise men from the East who came to visit the infant Jesus. And that meant trouble, because Herod didn't want somebody threatening his political ambitions. So that's an example of special Matthew.
Right. Okay. Great. Yes. Thank you. Yeah.
We'll stay with the Christmas stories. Luke is the only gospel that mentions the shepherds, right? So think of what Christmas pageants would be like if there weren't people in Luke's community telling them, no, listen to me, angels came to these shepherds and they said something in a completely strange language called King James English, saying, behold, be not afraid, for I bring good tidings of great joy, which will be to all people. And there were a bunch of Aramaic speaking shepherds. They didn't understand a word of what was going on. So this is the source hypothesis that helps us kind of shape our understanding of how these gospels came to be written. Because again, the thesis of this class is going to be that the diversity and the variation of how Jesus is presented is a reflection of the community that created the gospel. So this is great. We've got our three gospels, but of course there's a fourth, and there's John. And John is largely an independent source. It contains multiple stories of Jesus returning again and again to Jerusalem. And it just seems to be, you know, if you were to ask KCRA News, what is the news of the day? They're going to be focused on Northern California. They're going to be focused on Sacramento and the Caldor fire. If you go down to the Bay Area and ask for the news, they're going to give you largely maybe the same things, some of the same highlights, but it's going to have a regional interest. It's going to be talking about Tahoe as a recreation destination, not as people's homes, right? And so that's what the Gospel of John is. It's an independent source, or the eyewitnesses that helped John write his gospel didn't seem to have much overlap at all with the people who helped Mark, Matthew, and Luke write their gospels. So I'm going to stop there, because that's, if you can follow me through that, you are now as smart as any second-year seminary. You guys are ready to go. Mary is laughing and nodding her head, so I'm clearly right on that point. But any questions on that source hypothesis? Yes, Chip and Peggy.
Yeah, hey, Matt, so were all four of them disciples in living and walking with Jesus? Was it looking at the years they were written, or when you talk about the community they served, weren't they all at the same time in the same places?
So this is a place where there's kind of a diversity of opinion. There are part of Christian tradition ascribes the Gospels, or some of the Gospels, to some of Jesus's disciples, right? Because there was a tax collector named Matthew who was a named disciple. But there doesn't seem to be a lot of evidence that Matthew, excuse me, I got the hiccups, wrote that the disciple Matthew wrote the Gospel of Matthew. That doesn't mean to say he didn't. There is no evidence that we have found to link the two. the tradition around the Gospel of Mark was that Mark was a disciple of Peter. And so Peter is the one telling Mark, well, then here's what happened. And after that, we went here. So Mark is never, even from the earliest traditions of the church, is never associated with being a disciple. The same with Luke. Luke is known, and it actually later on in the book of Acts is identified as a follower of Paul, right? So very later on, when the author of Acts is talking about journeying with Paul, he uses the word we, and that's kind of the linchpin of, oh, okay, Luke was a companion of Paul's. And John is, of course, associated with the beloved disciple. So that answers maybe part of your question as to whether or not these were disciples. The dating for this, the dating of the Gospels, so Mark to the late 60s, Matthew and Luke to the 70s and maybe early 80s, and John to the 90s, is something that we, and I'm going to get to this in a few slides, something we kind of, like archaeologists, we dig at. And if you can look at the text subtly enough, it's going to give you clues as to what is going on. So one of the reasons why we think John was written so late is we think we are very confident that John was written after the Jewish Christians, because Christianity isn't its own religion yet, right? Jesus was a Jewish Messiah in the first century. And so as the culmination and fulfillment of Jewish expectation, the people who believed in Jesus were Jewish. That's how Peter and Paul got into butting heads all those times, is do we have to circumcise people? Do we have to bring converts into the Jewish faith in order to be saved by the Jewish Messiah, right? So if you read like John chapter 9, which is the story of the boy born blind, there are these little clues of saying like, well, if anybody who professed Jesus as Messiah was kicked out of the synagogue. Well, that didn't happen until around the year 90. And so if we read that in the gospel, that anybody who professes faith in Jesus is kicked out of the synagogue, it seems like a likely deduction that this gospel is being written after that break, when Jewish Christians are kind of shown the door out of the synagogue. So that's a clue there. One of my other favorite clues is the reason I got ordained as a priest is the story of Jesus healing a paralytic. And so there's 4 friends. They're hoping that Jesus would heal their paralyzed friend. Everybody is crowding the house. They can't get him in front of Jesus. So what do? They climb up to the roof and they lower their friend on the mat down right practically onto Jesus's lap. Where are the clues? Well, in the Gospel of Mark, it says that the friends dug through the mud roof of the house that Jesus was in, which tells us that Mark was living in a place where the roofs are made of mud thatch. You get to the Gospel of Luke, and what did his friends do? They removed the tile from the roof before letting him down. So Luke lives in a place, or at least expects his audience to understand that people live in houses with tile roofs. So and what we're going to do over the next 5 weeks is we're going to tease out these details, because I think they give us some pretty accurate clues as to the community which created this gospel. Is that way too long of an answer for your question, Chip? Nope. Okay.
Nope, and that helps put the community comment into our definition into perspective thing.
Yeah. So, and what I would like to suggest is, as I said earlier, some of these contradictions can be easily explained by Jesus doing similar things multiple times. So Jesus spoke to a crowd. Okay, Jesus did that lots of times. You say he spoke on a rainy day, you say he spoke on a sunny day. There's no reason to think that those are mutually exclusive. The fact that Jesus healed multiple people over multiple years, there's going to be some repeats with small variations of setting or place. But the contradictions, they become harder to explain when we know the event only happened once. And I bring your attention to the events of Good Friday. We know that the events of Good Friday only happened once. So we can't say that that the sun's light fails and then Jesus dies in darkness, and say that the light was shining, the sun was shining on Jesus when Jesus gave up his spirit, because we know that only happened once, and that kind of has to be a binary. And so then this is our kind of entree into a discussion about Christology. Why does it matter to Mark that Jesus dies in darkness? And perhaps even more importantly, why is it super important for John that the cross is a place of glory and not a place of shame? Why is it that the sun cannot fail? The other question is, of course, to back up, a few hours on the day, you've got Mark that says, they compelled the passerby, Simon of Cyrene, who's the father of Alexander and Rufus. I think I forgot Alexander earlier, right? But you read the Gospel of John, and John is absolutely clear. Jesus took the cross by himself and went out to the place that is called the skull, which in Hebrew is called Golgotha, right? And so that gives us another clue, right? John is talking to a group of people that doesn't understand Hebrew. He has to translate what Golgotha means. We read the Gospel of Mark was our lesson for last Sunday, right? And Mark has to explain how, Mark has to explain some of the Jewish customs, right? For the Jews, don't eat without washing their food, and there's other observances that they keep, the washing of cups, or bronze cups and kettles, right? That means that Mark is not part of a Jewish community. He's got to explain parts of Judaism to a non-Jewish audience. And so that's what we're going to be doing over the next couple of weeks, is looking with a microscope at some of these details, some of these differences, because they're going to give us clues as to the gospel's original audience. So when we build all of this up, but this is like a detective case. If we know that Mark has to translate Aramaic, and we know Mark has to explain Jewish customs, we can tell pretty clearly that Mark was not writing in and around Palestine, because he's got to translate Aramaic words and he has to explain Jewish customs, right? And so we're going to be looking at these details. We're going to be looking at these differences as clues to the communities that wrote these Gospels. Any questions there? I just want to break, I'm sorry, to my eye, all of you are over here, so on my second screen. But any questions about that? Because that's kind of the thesis of the course of our whole time together. No? Okay. Looking at the differences gives us clues to the makeup of the original audience of these Gospels, but they also reflect and they illustrate what was important to this group of Christians about Jesus. So why does it matter that why does it matter that Matthew has Jesus speak on a mountaintop where Luke has him speaking on a plain? Well, because Matthew thinks that Jesus is in some way a new Moses. He is not giving his followers new laws, but he is perfecting the law that Moses revealed. And so for him, it makes sense. Place that speech, place those Beatitudes on a mountaintop. He is speaking for God, just as Moses did. Luke has a big concern for the financially poor. There's going to be a lot of stories about wealth in Luke's gospel, where conversely, in Matthew's gospel, there's a lot of stories about mixed communities. There's a lot of stories about the wheat and the chaff. How do we separate them? And Jesus says, you don't separate those. The angels will do that at the end of days, right? So looking at the differences between the gospels is our joint work for the next few weeks. All of this, let me just back up and say, we should probably talk about what a gospel is ever so briefly, right? So a gospel that we're talking about are the canonical gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. I'm looking, it wasn't John. Who was it? Somebody. Can't remember who it was. Somebody talked about, oh, it's Barry. That's who it was. Talked about like maybe there'll be a sixth or a seventh Christ. There are other gospels that were written that we have copies of that are not part of our Bible. The Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Peter, the Gospel of Mary. So there are other Christs, but we're going to be talking about the 4 canonical Gospels. If you want to, we can hang out after one session later on and we can talk about those other Gospels because they're super interesting. But the Gospels were written in a Koine Greek, which is kind of an informal, kind of colloquial Greek. And it's a story about a person's life. So it's a little bit biography. But there are no Gospels of Julius Caesar, right? There are no Gospels of Cleopatra. Gospels are a hybrid of biography and of faith. They contain history, but they are meant to inspire belief. The end of the Gospel of John says this wonderfully. It says, now Jesus did many other things in the presence of his disciples, right? This is the end of chapter 20. These things are written so that you may come to believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that through believing you may have life in his name. John perfectly tells us this is what a gospel is. It's a story of Jesus, and it is meant for you to believe in who Jesus is at its conclusion. So I'm going to return you. Let me check the chat. Sorry. Perfect. So I just want to return you to where we are. So here are the 5 Christs. And so next week, we're going, oh, there we go. We're going to look at the Gospel of Mark. And your homework is to read the Gospel of Mark before we come back together. And of course, if you don't, come to class anyway. It's not required, it's just recommended. What you're going to notice about Mark is how fast-paced it is. You could read the Gospel of Mark and think that Jesus' earthly ministry lasts no more than a couple of months, and you wouldn't be wrong. The phrase that Mark always uses is "and then." Mark is like our 4-year-old telling a story, and then, and then, and then. But Mark's Jesus is one of a misunderstood leader whose own followers don't understand why or how a Messiah can be meant for suffering. They just don't get it. They don't understand what messiahship means. And Mark's Jesus seems to address persecuted Christians. He invites them to take up their cross and follow me, a revolutionary whose mission mysteriously succeeds. because, and I hate to give you a spoiler alert, Mark's gospel on Good Friday ends in total and abject failure. Easter Sunday in Mark's gospel ends in total and abject failure. After being greeted by the angels, the women run away, terrified, and they said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. Jesus has died alone, executed by the Romans, who have the real power, and his most ardent followers are too scared to say what happened. But somehow this revolutionary succeeds. The work and the message of his life somehow is shared. That's what we're going to be talking about next week. And then just to give you a little bit of a preview, so in 2 weeks, we're going to be talking about the rabbi. There we go, now they're correct. So Matthew's Jesus is the culmination of prophetic voices, the ones that announce that finally God's promise of Emmanuel, of God with us, is now here. Matthew's Jesus refers to these mixed communities that perhaps give us a clue that his community was made up of both Gentile and Jewish elements. And he is portrayed as a new Moses, as a perfecter of Jewish understanding. And then in 3 weeks' time, we're going to get to Luke, our storyteller. For Luke, all of human history has been leading to this moment. And you wouldn't ever expect it, that there is a peasant born in a forgotten corner of the Roman Empire. But his birth happens in such a strange context that foreshadows that the whole world is coming together for this moment. Luke's Jesus is a powerful storyteller who is compassionate to those he meets. He is the savior of the world who creates a new community of God's people. It really is a wonderful story. And just a quick word, I just want to show you intent. So Mark's the rebel here, and the crucifixion is kind of the most important moment for Mark, right? So that's why we've got this statue of Jesus in the crown of thorns. Matthew is our writer. And so we've chosen an icon, which are images written about Jesus. John is the mystic. He's the stained glass, the one that light filters through. The light of the world comes through Jesus. So that's why we're using stained glass. But I wanted to explain briefly the image of Luke. This was put together by AI, artificial intelligence, looking at the records of Jewish men of the ancient Near East. So this is artificial intelligence has created this composite image to give us a photoreal picture of what Jesus may have looked like. And so that's why Luke is a almost photoreal person, because he is the storyteller, the one of Jesus is really with us. So just want to say a word on that. In 4 weeks' time, we've got John the Mystic. John gives us a poetic understanding of God's incarnate word. He also invites us to a fellowship and to abide in Christ. And I apologize for the confusing text. We're going to conclude our class on October 7th, or October 6th, with the Jesus of our imagination. We're going to return to the question of Jesus asking, "Who do you say that I am?" We're going to recognize that this question is as profound as it is personal. And together we're going to explore how what we know Jesus to be is reflected in the Jesus and how we believe and who we believe Jesus is. So we're going to integrate, our time together is going to be spent separating and kind of sifting through all the clues that the Gospels have to offer us. In our final time, we're going to integrate this into hopefully a coherent whole. So I noted, so that's what I have for today. Oh, there we go. The animations were just a little bit late. So I noticed that we've run a few minutes over time, and I apologize for that, but I also want to kind of just share with you what I would hope to do. We're going to try and end closer to 8:30 next time, so I apologize. But what I would like to offer is I'm willing to kind of hang out online for, 10, 15, 30 minutes, however long you guys need. That if there are other questions that you have, or if you just kind of want to chit chat about and ask questions about the Gospels, we can play Stump the Vicar. It's one of my favorite games to play at Camp Galilee in the summer. So I'm more than happy to kind of hang out. You don't have to if you need to go. I want to make sure you guys have a chance to spend your evenings. But I did also want to invite you that if you'd like to hang out and ask a question, I'm more than happy to make myself available. You'll see an email tomorrow. It will have an introduction to the Gospel of Mark. Again, those signposts, things to look out for. But I look forward to seeing you guys next Wednesday night. We'll meet back here at 7 o'clock. It'll be the same Zoom link every time, but I'll be sending out those Wednesday afternoon, kind of like what you got today, just a quick reminder of what our agenda is, what we're going to be talking about. So would love to see you next Wednesday night. So,
Matt, I have a question.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, the 3rd and 4th weeks, I'm going to be in Scotland and England. So I see that for me.
Place to be.
So I see that the Zooms are being recorded. How do we access this?
So I'm going to be posting them to the Christ the King YouTube page.
Okay.
And that's another part of the reason why there's going to be the kind of Thursday email afterwards, is that will have the link to last night's session as well as the kind of look ahead for next week.
Okay, thank you.
Great. So before you guys go, before I say goodbye for the night, before kind of office hours, we'll call them, I just want to say a prayer, and then I'm going to hang up. So if you have any additional questions, I'll be here. So don't worry about that. So
Matt, I have a technical question.
He's just got a question.
Yeah. Good. The Lord be with you.
Also.
And also with you.
Let us pray. Almighty God, we give you thanks for your word, for the word incarnate, Jesus Christ, our Lord, and for the word shared to us in Scripture, a revealed image of your likeness and the good news of the coming kingdom. Be present with us in this community as we dive deeper into understanding of the works of your Son. Give us an inquiring mind and a discerning heart to know that with the diverse tapestry, that we may know you as our personal Lord and Savior. All this we ask through him, through whom all prayers are acceptable, Jesus Christ, your Son, our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Wonderful. So Larry, I saw you had a question. If you'd like to go.
Yeah, sorry. A question was, I had to research this link to get to you guys. I had to text Brad to find out what the link was. Do you send it out through email?
Yeah, let me put in the yeah, so what I've been using is, I've got two windows open. The Google sign up. Were you able to sign up on that class or on that webpage?
Yes, we signed up.
Okay, if you wouldn't mind doing it, or let me see if I can.
Right, we can do it another time.
Yeah, I'll double check, but the link you used today, so the email you got from Brad will work for all 6 weeks.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's fine. Got it.
Okay, I have a question, Matt. Do you not think that the author of Mark was the young man who's mentioned as the young man?
The one who runs away naked.
Yes, yeah.
Still going.
There's I've heard of that. In my own study, in my studies, there also is a a theory that that is Bartimaeus. So Bartimaeus is the blind man on the just outside the road to Jericho. And so he, Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me, right? Jesus gives him his sight, and then he immediately follows him. I've heard a theory that perhaps the young man who runs away naked in the garden is Bartimaeus. I haven't heard the idea that that might have been Mark. As I said, I think the most common part of Christian tradition identifies Mark as Peter's assistant. And what I'll talk about next week is what is so remarkable about that if it is true, it means that Peter is incredibly humble, because Peter comes off as a dolt in Mark's gospel. And so Peter must have told Mark, tell the story and tell it warts and all. And I, what I hope to be is humble enough to know that I can't say with certainty who wrote it, but I think there are some clues as to the community that helped produce it. So I won't say absolutely not or absolutely, but it's a nice theory to kind of volley back and forth. Absolutely.
But is that the only gospel that mentions the young man running away with the sheep?
I think so. I'd have to double check.
So why would he mention it if it wasn't him?
It's an interesting question. Yeah, I don't have an answer to that. I think a plausible answer might be that just to show just how scared Jesus's disciples were of the Romans, or of the excuse me, at that point it's not the Romans, how scared they were of the temple leadership, that someone would run away naked, I think demonstrates just how intimidating the Jewish leadership in Jerusalem at that time could be to upstart revolutionaries like Jesus. So, but yeah, I think that the theory that there's a little bit of an autobiographical nature, I'm not going to say no to it. It's an interesting theory.
I like it. I mean, I was raised with that, so I don't know.
Okay, well, yeah, and I think the identity of the evangelists, I'm going to have a hard time saying I know for sure who wrote it. But what I think the thesis of the class is that there's enough of these little details that give us clues as to the community that helped produce the gospel, and that I'm a little bit more confident in saying than actually saying, this is the person who wrote it. Clues to the community is it's a safer and more sure bet.
And this is what's so interesting for me, to keep an open mind about something I've known since childhood, or believed since childhood, that there are other answers. And thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Can I
Let's do Ann and Aaron.
So which Ann?
Ann Calloway, excuse me.
Oh, okay. So I have a question about you saying that Jesus died when it was daylight. I just checked it in John, and it just doesn't mention the dark. Is that what you mean, that it doesn't mention the darkness, or that it was actually broad daylight? I mean, it seems like that's the only that I would just say John didn't happen to mention it. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah. So the timeline, John has a timeline of what part of the day Jesus was executed.
Events, yeah.
So I believe that in the absence of saying that the sun's light failed, that John is suggesting that the sun was still shining at the moment.
It was during normal daylight hours.
Right.
Yeah, because he gives the hour of the day. So you say, well, this was like 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. If I think that's the way I figured it out once. That part could be wrong. And
Yeah,
Okay,
and so when we get to the Gospel of John, we're going to talk about why that is and why. So because the cross means something totally different for Mark than it does for John. So for Mark and for Matthew as well, the cross is a source of, or is a place of abandonment and pain for Jesus, right? We have Jesus
right.
saying, my God, why did you forsake me? Which is different from Luke, where Jesus is a little bit more pastoral, right? He says to the repentant
Yeah,
thief,
with the,
"You with me
yeah,
in
with the
paradise."
repent, yeah.
But even for Matthew, Mark, and Luke, there is, the cross is at best to be endured, at worst a place of agony. For
Right.
John, the cross
Right.
is the ultimate. Jesus is being raised up, and he uses that term throughout his, uses in John 3, just
Yeah,
as
like the serpent
Nate
in the
was,
book,
yeah, just
yeah.
like, yeah. The cross is a place of victory and a place of
Right.
the cross is a place of victory for John that it isn't for the other gospel writers. Yeah.
Okay, so you're just saying that John left it out, not that it didn't happen according to his account, right?
I'm going to be so bold as to suggest that because he didn't mention it, John thinks it didn't happen.
That seems very odd to me, because I could, if there's 3 witnesses to an auto accident, they're going to tell different stories.
Right, and so
I mean,
and
that's
what's
it's
so
just
important.
it's different versions. They're going to tell the part that impressed them, and it doesn't mean.
That's
You see
exactly
what I
right.
mean?
But John has a totally different idea of what's happening
Purpose.
in that accident.
Yeah, he has a
because-
purpose in telling his story, right?
But so Jesus actually dies on a different day in the calendar in John's gospel. So we just got through 6 weeks of Jesus saying, I am the bread of life, right? Because Jesus doesn't celebrate the Seder. He doesn't celebrate a Passover meal with his disciples. Instead, in John's gospel, Jesus is executed on Passover. Jesus becomes the Paschal lamb. It's
Do you
his.
get that Jesus was executed? John says he was executed on Passover. See, I'm
Yeah.
pulling out another device.
Yeah, so
Okay.
there's no.
I'll look and see
Yeah.
if I believe
Yeah,
you.
so there's no Passover meal with his disciples. He has a meal, to be clear. I mean, that's where we have, we've got 6 chapters of John. He's doing it, some of his best teaching. There's the washing, but it's not a Passover meal. John has Jesus being executed on a different day of the Jewish calendar. It's still a Friday. And we're going to see John's timeline makes more sense because, so Pilate says, I'm going to release a prisoner for you for the Passover, right? For the festival.
Right.
That doesn't make any sense if the Passover happened last night.
Yeah.
So John's timing is totally different.
I don't see how you get that John's version of the last 2 days of Jesus' life doesn't have them celebrating the proper feast on Friday, because it was a special feast week or
Right,
holiday, right? That started on Friday, and the Holy Communion is introduced in all of them, and so it seems to identify the same event.
It obviously happens during the week of Passover, right?
Yeah.
But Monday, Thursday in John's timing is not the Passover meal. And moreover, so there's this great worry.
Okay, so I'll look for Monday, Thursday.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I wanted
And
to
I want to
figure
get
out
to
what you're
Amy.
trying to say. Yeah.
Yeah, well, so there's a few things about Good Friday that don't make any sense if the Passover meal if Jesus formally celebrated a Passover meal the night before, it doesn't make sense to release Barabbas because the festival's already happened. It also doesn't make sense that why there is this rush to bury Jesus, right? They have to bury Jesus before sunset because that is a day of great solemnity. It's the day of the Passover. But to touch a dead body on Passover that began last night,
Right. Then you're defiled and you can't keep the feast.
and that only makes sense if the Passover is happening on sunset, not ending at sunset. So we got plenty of
Okay, yeah, so I'm gonna look at, that gives me enough to get started searching around and try and figuring out what you're trying to say. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Ann. Appreciate it. Aaron, thanks for being patient.
Yes, mine's just a technical question. Procedural one, nobody else is going to be interested, but I did not formally sign up for the class.
Okay.
But I got Brad's link. Is it important for me to do so from your perspective?
Yeah, because what I do is I pull, so I'm going to put it in the chat right now. Because I pull from this list to, oops, wrong button. I pull from this list to send the email. So
okay,
I'm going to put it.
All right.
So if you hang on for just a second. So if you click on that link in the chat, that'll take you to the registration page and we'll be good to go.
And Aaron, I will send you a copy of what, I'll forward it to you, okay? Just until you know that it's working, okay?
Okay, but I think we see it right here in the chat. We've got it.
Okay.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you, though. Good night, all.
Good night.
See you next week.
As my wife sneaks quickly on and off camera.
All right, Christy. Good night.
Larry or Barry, any questions?
Well, not from me, not from this Barry.
Okay.
Angel's happy and thanks you, and it's going to say good night.
My pleasure. Have a great night, everybody.
Good night, Matt, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you. See you next week.
Okay.